Hello, everybody. This is Joe Corley. This is the originator, the first owner and promoter of the Battle of Atlanta. And,
Atlanta.
and yes, and Joe and I have a lot of ties. When I came out of college, Joe was the person I worked for at his schools, and we've been friends, remained friends for all these years. And I felt this would be you're so gracious to be here today. I know you turned it over to Greg Ruth, running it now.
Yeah,
But
10 years he's been doing it, doing a good job.
right. And you're responsible. One of the things I'm trying to impress upon him, and you know this battle is so dynamic. It really had the impact on thousands of lives. And those that did well and won their titles and all their divisions, not only do they make covers or articles in magazines, but a lot of times Hollywood chose these specific great athletes to put it in movies and stuff. So you
Yeah.
really had an impact.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
are some of the great martial artists that been at the Battle of Atlanta over the years?
Well, the first one that comes to my mind is Keith Vitali, because he came from, oh, you know him, right? He came from South Carolina, and he got involved in our early SEKA organization, Southeast Karate Association. And I think that's where we first saw you and saw the kind of techniques you could do. And so we invited you to come down to Atlanta and work with us, and we got to train together and do all that kind of stuff. And then the next thing I know, you're winning and you're number one in the country 3 years in a row. Along the way, you had your picture made with Chuck Norris, which of course was another favorite of mine. Chuck joined us here in the formation of the SEKA, and then he came in and he probably attended 10 of the battles of Atlanta over the years. And so I had started training with him actually in 1972, so we had a good relationship. He had turned me over to his head instructor, who was Pat Johnson, who became my mentor. So Pat is actually the guy that helped me develop the Joe Corley Karate Studios. He helped me develop the Battle of Atlanta. He helped me put together the Tournament of Champions and all that kind of stuff. I don't think he's the one. I had this great Ferrari, GTB4, 1967 GTB4, and I had paid $9,000 for it at the time, which was about 4 times the price of a Corvette at the time. And I had to sell it 3 years later for $9,000 to finance the 1973 Battle of Atlanta. Now, of course, I can buy it back for $3.5 million. So I'm not going to say that was the best investment, but the people involved with all those pieces of the development of the Battle of Atlanta are the ones that I really remember the most. And of course, as you know, there's just been so many great athletes that have come through the battle that I remember all of them.
Well, the reason it has such an impact, not only on my life, but so many of the martial artists that were tournament fighters back in the day, is because in the magazines, the photographers would take a photograph on the floor of the battle. I think it was back in the old days at the Georgia Tech Coliseum. The top fighters would all be lined up. And all of us as young kids or young martial artists, we go, one day we want to be included. We want to be on that floor.
Yeah.
And that's what inspired us. And so I know my gentlemen, Dan Andersons, and all of us, we talked about it all the time, that it was this tournament. And again, from a personal perspective, I won it the first 2 years. It was my first national tournament. And it was a tournament that I think that put me on the path to films, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that. And one of the interesting things about the people lined up that you're talking about, this was a Pat Johnson idea. He said, one of the things that's rough about the Battle of Atlanta is that a lot of people don't want to compete in it because they're afraid in their first match they're going to be, paired up with a Keith Vitali or or Jeff Smith or a Bill Wallace. He said, you need to take all those guys and put them in a separate category, and then people that do well during the day get a chance to fight them at the end. So it takes away the fear of them being embarrassed in front of their students. So that's when I said Pat Johnson was responsible for that Tournament of Champions. That was the kind of the thought process. And in those days, Black Belt Magazine and Karate Illustrated and several others spent a lot of time talking about the point fighters. And so I know the first time I was on a magazine cover, I just had to read it over and over and over again. It's like, at a certain time in your life, you want to figure out who you are. And you think, gosh, maybe if I read this, I'll find out who I am. it didn't work, but it really is exciting at least to go through that exploration.
Well, your battle, when you first started promoting it, it created, I think, some of the best eras. We call it the golden era
Yeah.
that we enjoyed so much because we had the access to the magazine articles that
Yeah.
people would follow the tournament scenes.
Yeah.
And then the winners would be on covers. It was those covers that created stars. It was those covers that created the inspiration for others to be like and to follow.
Sure.
Not just here in our country, but those magazines at the time went all over the world.
Sure.
But the battle was the battle. You only had 4 or 5 major ones, but you knew if you had to make it, if you want to be great, if you want to be in the top 10, you had to come here. And that's what you said. And that itself had people drawn from not only or here, but all over the world would come in.
Yeah. Again, a lot of that credit goes to Pat Johnson's insights. And then when we did the Professional Karate Association, which now, of course, is PKA Worldwide Kickboxing, we used a lot of those same principles. But now we did 1,000 hours of programming on ESPN and NBC and CBS and Showtime and Turner Sports and you name it. Now you have a way to reach millions of people outside the martial arts. And so when the people who could appear in those fights were able to get feedback from all the kinds of people in the general public, then that gave them even a greater sense of accomplishment than just having people read about them in the magazines. But the principle was the same, exactly the way you described it. The principle is exactly the same.
Well, sometimes you're not even aware, or a lot of us aren't aware of the impact we have on others. But you personally, not just with the Spout of Atlanta, but in everything you've done in your life, have had an impact on millions. And it's hard to say that for other people to make that claim. But truly, your Bout of Atlanta and the things you did with the PKA and your schools and everything you did to promote martial arts, we always have considered you, and most people do consider you one of the innovators and one of the greatest promoters of all time.
Well, that's very nice. I have a number for someone named Christina Corley, Mrs. Corley. I want you to call her and try to tell her all this word for word.
Well,
what you just said.
I just want to thank you personally because you gave me a chance to work straight out of college. I worked for you first, right out of college, and then two, I had a chance to win this national tournament twice, which propelled me into films and other things in life. And so I personally had to thank you for everything you've done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate all the work you've done and so many of the people that we've had a chance to be involved with. It's really rewarding, just to have that synergy that we were able to create for this great period of time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim, for this.